All right, great. Welcome everyone. Really excited to kick things off with the Protected Species Workshop virtual version. Hopefully we'll be live again in the not too distant future. So on the screen, you can see the website for the workshop. It's got all the notes that I'll be talking from. I'll basically be demonstrating the stuff that I have on the notes, so you can kind of follow along with the notes while I'm doing things. And I'm going to put that link in the chat for you. There you go. All right. So when you go to that website, you can also click About Me, learn about me, but I'll introduce myself briefly. I am at the Northwest Fisheries Science Center. I'm in the Mathematical Biology Division. I've been teaching workflow, scientific workflow using R, Git, GitHub, and various other tools for quite a long time. In the more resources part at the top here, you'll see a link to some other R workflow workshops that I've given. Lots more material there, and along with recordings of all the sessions, so you can see that. If you go to the About Me, you're also going to see some links to other initiatives that I'm part of. I'm very involved in the Open Science Initiative, Open Source Initiative, and groups that are working to help expand that within the federal agencies. And in particular, we have a very active NIMS R user group, and you'll see a link to the NIMS R user group webpage, and we have links to our trainings and meetings and all that stuff there. I think I forgot to get the link for how you could join the NIMS R user group. I'll try to remember that in the break, but you can always email me and I'll send you the link to how to get added to the NIMS R user group so you can get our announcements. All right, so some logistics. My plan is to get you through basically part 1 and part 2 in the time that I have. And we'll see how far into part 3 I get. I'll just kind of play it by ear. I have one thing for sure I want to cover there, but I may just kind of open it up a little bit for questions, or perhaps I'll run out of time. In terms of questions, so with a workshop this big, I think I saw over 100 signed up. I don't know how many are on right now, but I know there's a lot of people on. So doing live questions doesn't work so well. However, we've got the chat. And so I encourage you to put questions in there, and then everyone follow the chat. And if you can answer somebody's question, please jump in and answer that. I know we have a kind of a diversity of skills in terms of what I'm going to be presenting, from people who could teach it like I can to people who have never been exposed to it before. So there's probably somebody on the call who can answer questions. I'll also be following the chat, but obviously when you're lecturing, it can be hard, especially if the chat gets really busy. Okay, and this is being recorded. So if you miss something, you want to rewatch it, you'll be able to do that. And then obviously my notes will be up here. All right, so let me hop in. Okay, so part 1 is going to be on key skills, how to get started with Git. Let's just jump in here. Okay, so first off, what is Git? So I got a little analogy here. So Git, you can think of Git as a tool, it's a program that creates a container like this box. It creates a special box that you put files in. These are my files, okay? So it creates this box with your files, and it creates a little notebook here. And Git is like a little gnome in this box, and it is watching what happens to this box, what happens inside this box. It doesn't look outside the box, it looks inside the box. It watches the box, and it records in this little notebook everything that happens to the box and the things in the box. So if I take one of my files out of the box and I move it out, the little gnome is going to record that in the history of the box, inside the box. And I just keep recording that. And so for you, what that gives you is for your box that you created, it's a repository is the jargon for that. You have this record, your history of everything that happened to the box, and you can go back in time and look exactly what was happening in the box. And in fact, this little gnome is a little bit magical in that it can do time travel backwards, not forward. And so it can let you re-enter your box and the state of your box in past states and time. So it's this program sort of concept of creating these containers that are being watched is really useful when you have a project, and it really helps you track what's happening to a project. And in your future self will be able to go back in time and see exactly what happened. So that's what Git is doing. It's creating these boxes. And this analogy of the box is actually really important because the box is special. Box is special. The box has this record in here, has this little the program is watching inside the box. So this is sometimes with beginners, they kind of think of repositories just like folders on your computer. There's a lot of similarities with folders, but they're different than folders. It's a special kind of folder. Okay, and what is GitHub? So GitHub is I wrote here on the notes, it's a website. It doesn't have to be exactly a website, but it's more like an application. It's like a framework around these boxes that does two things. Gives a lot of functionality of how you can interact with this box, do things with the box and the contents of the box from a website, say. It also gives a kind of a central hub in the cloud or on a server where you have your box, and then you have local copies that then interact with this repository. Okay, so GitHub is just holding on to your repositories, your boxes of files, and creating functionality about interacting with those. So next, little basic jargon. Repo is just short for repository. I'll try to say, well, I won't succeed at saying repository. Repo is such a common jargon. I'm sure I'm going to slip into that. And that is, as I said, that's the container with your, I wrote code, but could be files, images, whatever. It doesn't have to be code. These are just containers that you can put content into, these repositories. The actions, basic actions are commit, push, and pull. Commit just means writing a little note about a change. Sort of commit is just writing a little entry into that record book for the repository. Push means to push the changes and the record up to GitHub, and pull means to pull changes down from GitHub or wherever the master repository is, pulling those changes into your local computer. All right, so we got Gits. And then the last thing is these Git GUIs, graphical user interfaces, or just interfaces with Git. So these will be programs that allow you to do the Git actions without actually working at the command line. I'm going to be showing GitHub Desktop. Another common one that I've seen in our agency is Git Kraken. If you're a Jupyter user, there's an extension called Jupyter Git. These are basically interfaces to Git so you don't work at the command line. All right. So this first half of the workshop, we're going to learn the basic workflow for working with Git. And this is a basic workflow of when you're doing a workflow where you're keeping track of everything that you're doing. Okay, so this would be, so Git is what's called, it's a type of, the jargon is version control. So you're keeping control of different versions of things. And Git is just a really common one, and one that's widely used in our agency, and well, it's just very widely used. And so the workflow here is a little change to your workflow. So normally what we would be doing, so here's, I'll use this graphic down here. You would make a change on your computer to a file, you save it. You make another change on your computer, and then you save it. Okay, so that's a kind of a right typical workflow. So when we get into a version control workflow, Git workflow, we're going to add this little green box in there. So we're going to make a change on our computer. We're going to save it. And then at some point, you can do a few saves, right? You can make a few changes. We don't have to do the green box right away. But at some point, we're going to write a little note about what we've been up to, what we are changing, and we're going to make a commit. And what that's going to do is going to add the note, but it's also going to allow us to compare the status of the file now to the past. Until we do that commit, we're not going to be able to compare to the past. Okay, so here's what our workflow is basically going to look like in this kind of new version control. So Git workflow. We're going to make a change, make a few changes. We're going to write a note and commit that to the history. We're going to make some more changes. We're going to write another note and commit that to the history. We just keep doing that. And what this allows us is that I'm going to be able to compare the status of the file, and in fact, the status of the whole repository, to a prior commit, any prior commit that I want. Easiest one is going to be just to the most recent commit beforehand. Okay. So, so that's kind of the change locally to your workflow, is just adding this step in where you pause for a moment and you say, hey, what was I up to? What was I doing? And to put this kind of these markers in your record of what's going on in that repository. And then at some point when we decide to, we will go here and then push those up to the origin. In this case, we're going to be pushing it up to GitHub. So that's kind of our main one. That's sort of the mother repository. If people want to make a copy of our repository, or we want to make a copy, we're going to make a copy of whatever is on the on the server on GitHub. So the structure, go down here, I'll actually show you the structure here. So it looks kind of like this. This red is what the repository on GitHub, but we're working here locally, and we're doing all those changes and making those commits locally. And then when we're ready, we push that up to GitHub. So we have that kind of main version of our repository. And we could have many copies of this. So you imagine you were collaborating with someone, you could all have copies of the same thing and then be pushing your changes up so that everybody can kind of stay synced together as you're working on this project together. What I'm going to focus today on, though, is these basic skills for you to work by yourself. That's what I'm going to talk about in part 1, in part 2. And then in part 3, I'll talk a little bit about work collaborating with others, which it's not hard. It's not hard. It just requires a little more coordination. Okay. So as an aside, if you were to Google Git Workflow, or you go onto one of the many online courses for Git, you are going to see something very complicated like this. So they're going to show you, they're going to be talking about things called branches. So you've got this master version of your container. So here's my master container here. And then I might make a copy of this and I work on there. So now I've cloned this. And then I want to work over here, and then I've got to merge things back in, and then I could make a copy of my copy, and it gets very complicated. So that is, that's for when you have a lot of people working on the same repository at the same time. You know, it's a common workflow for, like, you know, a big group working on code development. For scientists, in my experience, I cannot think of a case where folks are doing this. Scientists, I mean, it's just not really common. And firstly, not copies of, you know, copies of copies, that kind of thing. Typically, we're working in small teams, and we are working just on one copy of our repository, so one version of it, this one branch, as so to speak, to use the jargon, and we're just making our changes to that one branch. That is by far the most common workflow that I see. And if it's a little more complicated, and I'll get on this in the part 3, we might do one branch, one copy, and we work kind of separately, and then we'll merge those changes back in. So it's a much, much, much simpler workflow. And when you're starting out, I tell people, don't mess around with branches. Just don't. That in my experience, gets people in so much trouble, and it's really not necessary for the vast majority of people. When you're starting out, just working on just forgetting branches altogether and just thinking about, hey, I got one box. I got a box on my local computer, and I got this box, this repository on GitHub. That's it. No branches. Okay. So what are the key skills that you need to develop for working with Git and GitHub? I am going to demonstrate this first with GitHub desktop. And I think, in my experience, most of you should be able to get this downloaded, that IT will download this. I know at my center you can. A lot of centers you can. If you can't, you can put in a request to IT to allow you to download that. I helped out someone at headquarters get their IT get permission to download that. It's a pretty easy process because it's widely used across our centers. And the reason that I recommend GitHub Desktop, and actually it's what I use personally, it's really, really easy entry. Basically, you download it, you log in to GitHub on it, and that's it. It just works. Whereas you're going to see, I'm going to, after I show you with GitHub Desktop, I'll show you with RStudio Cloud, just to give you another example, and you'll see there's a few more steps involved. I'm not going to show it with RStudio because on my local computer, because there's actually another step involved in terms of getting telling RStudio about where Git lives, which is a big friction point. Okay, I'll get back on some of those issues in part 3, but let's just sort of jump into the basics of working with Git. All right, so here are the skills that you need. Now, there are a lot of different ways that you can accomplish the things I'm going to show you. This set of 4 skills I have found from teaching is like a really robust way, and students don't get into trouble doing the skills in the order that I'm going to show. Okay, and these 4 skills, they're really pretty simple skills. You will be able to figure out how to do basically everything you need to do, or 95% of what you need to do, just by learning these 4 skills. So let's hop in. Skill 1, create a blank repository on GitHub. All right, so let's do it. Okay. Let's go here. Let's show it here. Okay, skill 1. Here we go. Skill 1. Okay, so you can follow on the notes to see this. Okay, so first what you need to do is go and get perfect. I guess see somebody was able to download it without admin. Excellent. Okay, great. Hopefully others can too. Okay, so I'm going to go to my profile. Okay, there we go. So this is me. You can see I have lots of repositories here. This is my personal GitHub site. And what I want to do first is I just want to create one of these blank containers. And it is certainly possible for me to do this on my local computer. But I recommend that folks create your first container up on GitHub, create a blank container on GitHub, and then pull that in. And the reason for that is that if you do it in that order, sort of make it up on GitHub and pull it onto your local computer, all the connectivity is going to be fine. You're not going to run into any trouble about not being able to push your local changes up to GitHub. Whereas it's kind of easy to mess things up if you create it locally. Like the first time you do it, it may work great, and then the second time it doesn't work, and then you spend an hour, you waste an hour trying to figure out why it's not working. But if you create it on GitHub first, always works. So here we go. So we're going to click New Repository. There we go. I will ignore template for what I'm doing here. And I'm just going to test. I don't have to add this. I'm going to make it public. I could make it private, but I'm going to make it public. All right, so to be able to pull it onto my computer, I'm going to have to add a README. So I have to add some sort of blank file. I always want to do that. Add .git ignore. I'm going to add that. You don't have to. I always do. And the reason is that there are files that you won't want to push up to GitHub. And this .git ignore file is what tells it which files on your local computer not to push up. So I always add it just so that it's there. And then you can either have no template, it'll just create the file, or you can save yourself a little work. If you use one of the templates, it'll add kind of the standard files that you would want there. So, right, if you're working in Python, you can have it here. There's probably maybe Jupyter there. I don't know. Okay, but I am going to go here and click R because that's what I'm going to show. By the way, everything that I'm showing is kind of programming language agnostic. I am showing it with R, but if you program in Python or in anything else, MATLAB, or you don't program at all, you're just working with files, all this stuff works the same. GitHub is just it's just a container. You can put whatever you want in your container. So now I create. All right, so I have created a repository. That's it. It's that easy. Okay. I could add files. I could edit files. I could, here, before I do anything, I could edit this, and I'm going to show that later. Okay, great. So I've created that. So that was skill 1. That's it. Skill 1. Okay, simple. Go ahead, you can try that out. Get good at skill 1. So the next skill that I need to do is I need to get that box. So I've created my box. And what is in my box? My box has only 2 things in it. It has this record of the box. So, and it's got the little gnome in there who's going to be watching the box. And it has a README file. This is my README file. I guess it's got that .git ignore too. But the main thing is it's got that README file and it's got my record. So it's a pretty empty box, but that's okay because it's a box. I can put whatever I want in it now. But I need to figure out how to get that box on my computer because I'm going to be working on my computer and putting things in the box from my computer. So how do I do skill number 2? So the lingo is to clone. So I'm going to clone the repository that's on GitHub onto my computer. So let's see how to do this with GitHub Desktop. So this workflow that you see for cloning is going to be pretty similar with other ways of getting other platforms also. Okay, so the first thing I got to do is I go to the repository. You can see it's got github.com, it's got my name, and that has the repository name. And I just want to copy that. So I want to copy the URL. So that's what I did. I selected it, I'm going to copy it. Got it. So now the next step is I'm going to go to GitHub Desktop. So here it is. I'm going to go to File, and there's the clone. That's what I want to do. I want to clone that. All right, so so you're going to see this window show up, and one nice thing about GitHub Desktop is that it's going to show you all your repositories that you have on GitHub. So you could just or I could just scroll through this and get one of my existing ones. So that can be kind of handy. I actually have so many repositories that I always just jump over to the URL. And the URL is also useful if, say, you wanted to clone a repository that's not your own. though that's not typically, there are reasons you wouldn't quite do it that way. So normally what you're going to be doing is cloning your own repositories. The reason for that is you want to be able to push changes back up, and you can only push changes up to a repository that you are a owner of. Okay. So I just paste the URL there, simple, and I hit clone. Okay, so before I hit clone though, I need to decide where it's going to put my repository. I got to put my box somewhere on my computer. Yes, Amy, I will repeat those steps just a second. Okay, so this is really important. So before you start working with GitHub and you start working with repositories, make a place on your computer for all of them. In the beginning, you'll think, oh, why do I really need to do that? I mean, I'll just remember where they are. I'll put it in my regular computer file structure. That will get you into trouble later, trust me. These GitHub boxes, they are not folders, they're special folders. They've got that little gnome in there, they've got that record in there, they're special. And you need to always remember that they're special. And also you're going to want to find them later. And trust me, you're going to get lost if you put it in your regular file structure. So for me, I have all of mine in documents and in a folder called GitHub there. So I have a lot of repositories there. I'm monitoring, it's probably over 100. So I have 100 in there. So I always know where they are. Don't ever have any trouble finding them, and I know exactly where to put them. Okay, so Amy asked to see that sequence of cloning again. So let's watch that again. Okay, so the step one was I created a repository. When I was on my main profile here, I had a little, oh, you can see it right here. I clicked that X and then new repository. So that's creating my container. Okay, I create that. I gave it a name. I put a README in. I'm just checking the checkboxes to do that. The next step is I go to that repository. So I'm here. So if I were here, I would see a link to my repositories. I click that. And you can see it up here. And you see it there because it's sorting by the last updated. I could also sort by name. I click that. There we go. So now I'm there. And now you can see, you can tell I'm there because it's GitHub, it's got my name, and then it's got the name of my repository. That's the URL I want to copy. GitHub desktop here. So I've opened GitHub desktop now. It's file. Local would mean on your computer. We're not doing that. We're cloning something from GitHub. There we go. And then what's going to show up? It's going to show up here, GitHub.com with this tab selected. You're going to go over here to the URL. So as I said, this process of kind of cloning, it's going to be similar on other ways that you might pull that copy onto your local computer. So if you did that with RStudio, you would also be working from the URL of your repository. Let's go ahead and clone. Yeah, someone had a comment here about doing it backwards. Yeah, go ahead and try. And you may, that button to publish it to GitHub might work. As I said, yeah, sometimes it works just great, and then other times you get into trouble and it causes, can't figure out why exactly it's not working. So that's why I always create it on GitHub first and pull it down just because in the 1 in 10 times that I run into a hassle, I waste time. Okay. But it's mainly, you know, in a teaching situation where I'm working with 100 people, like that, creating it locally and pushing it up is going to work great 99 times out of 100, perhaps. That's probably more like 90 out of 100. But there's always going to be a few people who will run into the snafus that happen. All right, so that's it. So I did that file clone, I put the URL in there, and now, whoo, hey, it's here. It's on my computer. And where did it go? Well, I know where they always are. As I told you, I always put them in the same place. I put them in Documents and in GitHub and date modified. There it is, test 1. If I open that up, you can see it's got that README. It's got that .git ignore. And look here, it's got this hidden folder called .git. You may not see that if you don't have it set up to see hidden folders. My experience working with Git repositories, it's helpful to be able to see the hidden folder. So on my computer, I always have it set up so that I can see the hidden folders. All right, but and this is basically kind of the information that the GNOME is using. What'll happen if I double click it? Here we go. Yeah, so this is the information about your repository. Don't mess around with these. It can be helpful to look at them sometimes, but don't edit them, because you're going to end up having to delete your repository and start over. But as I said, sometimes it's helpful to look at that and see kind of what your little GNOME in your repository is using. Great. Okay, so that's skill 2. Getting a repository on GitHub onto our computer. Good. Yeah. Once you have cloned it, and can you change the file path? How do you show, Callie asked, how do you show those hidden folders? It's kind of depend on what operating system you are. So just say, whatever, you know, if you're on a Mac, just say, you know, Mac, show hidden folders, you know, PC, obviously. So change that. Okay. Okay, Amy. Okay. All right, so as I said, we've got some questions here. Yeah, I encourage folks to kind of watch that. I'm going to watch it a little bit. If it's easy to answer, I will answer it. Or if you want me to re-show something, I'll do that too. But hopefully others can jump in and help out with some of those things there. Super. Okay, so let's do now the next skill. And this skill, I called this skill 0 because this skill is actually how to edit files in a repository. And you already know this skill. You already edit files on your computer. So you know, if I wanted to just you know, edit this, it's a text file, I could just double click it and edit it. There's nothing really special. It's just a file there. So you already have that skill. If you are working, say, in our studio, and this workshop is not actually about our studio, but I'm going to show you how you would do this in our studio. This is not, what I'm showing, this skill here is not Git specific. It's just how do I get that folder that I just created, which was the test one. How do I get that into RStudio so I can edit it from there? Again, this isn't coding specific. You know, if you had Excel files there, you wouldn't be opening them in RStudio. So in RStudio, you work with folders as projects. So you would click New Project. That directory already exists. I created that folder in the documents. So I do existing. It's not new. There's nothing new. It already exists. It's on my computer. So it's here. And now where is it? It's a GitHub repository. So I always know where those are. I know those are in documents and GitHub because I always put my GitHub document repositories there. And then I'm going to go down. And there it is. So I'm going to add that. Okay. Okay. So now I can see those the files in that folder within RStudio, and I'm going to edit from here. For those of you who are not using RStudio, or you're not R programmers, just open up, say, the README file however you want. You can just use a text editor. So I open that up. There we go. There's that file. And that's the file we created on GitHub. All right, so that was skill 0. Now let's get back to our GitHub skills. So the next skills that we have here, and there are actually 2 skills. I ended up, I guess I didn't break them apart here, but up here I broke out the pushing as a separate skill. So I'm going to address these as 2 separate skills: committing local changes and pushing those changes up to GitHub. Those are 2 different things. So let's go here. So the committing part, remember, it's just writing about what I just did to GitHub. That's all that committing is. And it's kind of creating a mark so that I can compare to previous commits. So let's go ahead and make a change to our file. So I just jumped over to RStudio and I'm working at the README file that's in the repository test1. And I'm going to add some. Yep. I am going to save that. Now I'm going to hop over to GitHub desktop. And now we see something has happened. This is our repository. We see that it's we've got a change. It has observed that something changed in our repository. It's telling me what those things are. So it's these 2 things have changed. Let's go back here and let's add another change. Let's add a file. Let's add, we'll add a bar script. We're going to give it a name, .r. So now you can see a file has showed up here. Let's go check over here. And now I'm back. I just jumped over to RStudio desktop. Sorry, GitHub desktop. And you can now see that file has appeared. And you can see what the change is. I can click here. I can see that what happened is it's getting rid of this line, and not sure why it's showing it adding it. But basically I added this line right here. If I click on this one, you can see that it's plus, so it's added a new file that's not up on GitHub. Okay, so this skill 3 is how to write a little note about what I've changed. So there are kind of two different ways I could approach this. One approach is that I could just write one note for all these things. And that's definitely a really quick one because I can just write a note right here. And then you'll see I could commit that. But before, in practice, when you're doing this, what you want to do is stop for a moment and think about your future self. Is there any reason you would want to like get rid of any of these changes one by one? Are all these changes related? If it's the case that your future self might want to like get rid of the change, like in test R, like I'd like to go back and get rid of just that change, then you're creating a little hassle for yourself by committing them all together, because you can get rid of single commits, but sort of what's called cherry picking a single file out is a bit of a hassle. Also, like if you're sort of mixing one comment for things that are kind of unrelated, that makes a little bit of a mess of your history in the future. So that's one thing. So what I will tend to do if I'm working, I will group together the things that are related. So here I've got the README, and I'm going to add a note, which is added a little text. And then for the description, now in this case, you know, if I were doing just a little thing like this, I'd probably just say a little note like that. But let's imagine that this were a more complicated edition, and that I would like to be able to search my book here, right? This is going to have a lot of info. I'd like to be able to find things in the future. So I may, you know, this was the salmon harvest. Because I'm thinking ahead of what I might want to search for. Okay. Again, a small change, I'm not going to do that, but if it were a big change, I'd be writing something a little bit more here. So there we go. I just committed it, and if with the history is our book about this repository, and I can look at that history, so I can see that this is what I did. It tells me what this was about, and it shows me what happened. So I still got a few more changes. Let's hear, and this is added a function for adding numbers, and commit that. And I actually don't want to push this up. I personally don't push these kind of files up. And so what I can do in GitHub Desktop is I can, I just did a right click, and you can see it gives me some handy options. One option is that, well, I didn't intend to have that there at all, so I could discard it. That's kind of handy. But what I want to do here is I want to ignore it. So I'm going to add it to Git Ignore. So this is really handy because it will happen that, you know, maybe you've added some massive file or just something that you don't want to be pushing up to GitHub for whatever reason. And this is really easy way to add it to your Git Ignore. So I'm going to click that. Let's see what happens. So now you can see that file disappeared. So we've just told the little gnome in our repository, hey, don't track that file. So it's ignoring it. And now let's let our Git Ignore, and you can see it added it right here. So you can tell it what you want it to ignore.
Excuse me, Elliot, can we stop? And I mean, there is a lot of things going in the chat that we lost. Oh, I'm lost.
Perfect, perfect. I will stop right now, and let's get the chat going here. If I can see it. Okay. Okay, great. So let me go here. Okay. Okay, great. Okay, so, right, okay. So, so the question was about, okay, so I jumped in, I was using RStudio just to edit the files. Let's go back, and I'm going to go to the folder. Here's that test folder, okay? And from RStudio, I was editing some things, and I added this little script here. I didn't have to use RStudio. It's just convenient for me to be, you know, because I'm used to it. I could also open it just with a text editor. So I'm right here on my PC. I've got that folder open. I could double click README. And you can see I've opened that up in Notepad. I could open that in anything. And I can add some more information. So the key thing here is that I am just editing the files within that folder, within that repository. That's all that's happening there. If I save that, by now I'm going to jump over to GitHub desktop, and which is watching that, you can see there's now been a change. I've done something to that file. It doesn't matter how you do something to that file. You can open it with any application. What's happening is the Git is just watching everything in that repository to see that something has changed, and it's going to record that change here. So it's recording that I added more information. So I can now say, you know, a note about what just happened. I added look at that history about what has happened, and this is the history of this repository box. Everything that has happened inside this box, you can see I've added another line. So again, like if you are working in, you know, if you were working in Python, you would not be using RStudio probably. You could, but you probably wouldn't. But it doesn't matter. Just whatever, however you want to edit those files. If you are doing images, you're going to be probably using some image software and adding images there. Doesn't matter. What Git is doing is whatever you have in that box, it is going to watch it, and it's going to tell you that it changed, and you're going to be able to add a little note about it changing. Okay. Okay, great. Okay, great. So somebody asked, can GitHub be connected to Adobe Photoshop, for example? So GitHub is just tracking this box. What you want to put in that box, how you want to edit things in that box, doesn't matter. Now, keep in mind that something like Adobe Photoshop, you know, I don't know the structure of those files. I'm betting it's something like, you know, Excel or like Word, in that it's not like a plain text that Git can kind of do the diffing. So sometimes it'll show that the file changed, but it won't be able to show you, like, you know, line by line what changed. But you can definitely put image files and update image files, and it will show you that those have changed. And you can put a little comment about what the change was about. Okay, great. Yeah, so next thing it wants to do, push to origin. So I just like say any files that a user wants to keep track of needs to be in the same folder. Yes, it does. Yes, that's right. You can have as many of these boxes as you want, but the box is the box. Everything in the box is going to be tracked together. Everything in the box has one record book. You make another box, that box is going to have its own record book. And that other box is not going to follow this box. It's its own box. Boxes are separate. Repositories are separate, and they each have their own kind of records. So like typically what you're going to do is you're going to have a repository for a project for the files and code and data files and images, whatever it is that you need in that project. They all kind of fit together. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump to the next skill, which is push those changes. So as Kyle said, yeah, I've got something that shows up here that says push to origin. Well, let's go check out GitHub. Right, we have test on GitHub. Here it is. I will go ahead and refresh this. Hey, where are all our changes? We just made a bunch of changes, but they're not here. Well, let's go back and look at this, how this workflow works here. It's like this. We're making changes locally. We are writing locally. So we're updating our little record book, making a change. We update our little record books. We're sort of keeping our record of what's happening in this box, but we haven't told GitHub about that yet. We haven't pushed those changes up to GitHub. So you can work as long as you want locally, and then when you're ready, you push those changes up to GitHub. So let's go ahead and push them. So I'm back in GitHub desktop, and what you can see is a few things that gives me a clue that I haven't pushed things. Number one, if I click on the history here, click on that history tab, I see these up arrows. That's cluing me in. Those have not been pushed up to GitHub. I also am going to see at the top there, it says push to origin. So let's go ahead and push, see what happens. So push, push, push. Okay, so let's head back over to GitHub here. Let's go here. I got to refresh. And there they are. You see the README has changed, and I've added that script file. I see over here this little clock, which is the commits. That's basically my history. I can click there. I can see exactly what has happened, what I have done. Imagine too, if you had two people working together, you could go on and see exactly what they had done. And, you know, I can go back if I forget, wow, what was I doing when I did this? What exactly was that about? I can click that. And so I can basically, you know, I'm opening up this book and I'm looking at what was happening here. So I can see that, see exactly what I did. Let's go back. So another cool thing here is that, let's say I was doing a lot of work. So I'm about a month in, I've made some changes, and I've got a problem. And I can't figure out why something is not working. When did it stop working? And okay, yeah. So this thing over here, you see this, the button all the way on the side, it says browse the repository at this point in history. So this is the little time machine. So I can click that. And now what I see on GitHub is the status of the repository at that time in history. And it kind of clues me in that I'm in a little bit different place, because over here I see, instead of it saying main, it has this here. So that can be really handy to be able to kind of go back and forth in history. Okay. Subfolders. Can subfolders be used as well? Absolutely. So I can go here And so I'm just, what you see here is I'm just in the folder on my computer. I'm going to do right click. I'm going to say new folder. There we go. I'm going to call it images. Say. Now I can put all my images in there. So one, I do need to put something here before picture. Not actually going to do that, but just a comment there. Once you create a folder, it won't push that up until you put something there. So you can put things there, and then when you go here, you'll see that it will have those changes. It's not showing up because that folder's empty. I have to put something in that subfolder, but it works just like normal. And then when you push that up to GitHub, you're going to see that subfolder. You can click on that and see your images, say, or data, or whatever you're using the subfolder for. Okay, question. Can we think as branches as a box within the master box? No, it is not a box within the box. It is a copy of the box. It is a virtual, yeah, an image, a copy of the box that has some special connections to there's not the main. You've just created clones of these boxes, copies of these boxes, special types of copies of the boxes. Now you have 2 of them. Okay, so where do you go to see the history on the GitHub site? Let's go here. So here I'm at my repository. Okay, so let's go through the whole thing here. So here I'm just at my GitHub webpage. You can see it's got GitHub. It's got my name there. Now I can click the repositories. It's going to show me them all. This is the one I just added. I can click that, and now you see this little what that change was. You see that change was I added this this line here. Yeah, okay. So now we're going to revert that. So we're going to revert that. So I'm going to get rid of that. Revert. All right. And so that little arrow there tells you that it was just local. Okay, well, that's cool. So what did I just revert? I got rid of that line here. And let's go check this out. I'm going to jump over to the folder. So this is the repository here. And let's open that up. Ah, hey, it's gone. It's gone because I reverted it. So I got rid of that change. And go ahead and close that. This is the old one. That's why. Okay, great. So it reverted it, and but we see that arrow there. It's only on my local machine. It's not pushed up to my to GitHub yet. So if I were to go to GitHub, I'd see that second line, and I can now push. And there we go. So if I go up to GitHub, I will see that that change will now be reflected on GitHub. Alrighty. So we're now at 11:10, and let's kind of hop here. I want to show you this a couple other good skills to know, basic things to know. Oh, I see I've got a question. Alexander asked, any ideas on why I only have a fetch origin but no push origin? So you only are going to see push origin when you have changes that need to be pushed, and you only have, well, actually be more accurate, when you have commits that there are to push. So these green things are what you're pushing. You can make all the changes you want, but it's not going to show up as something to push until you do the commit. So you got to do that commit step. So if you've changed, commit. So remember, you've got a little bit of a different workflow here. You make the change or changes, then write a little note and commit, make some more changes, commit, and then when you're ready, push. Okay, yeah. So so there's a suggestion for moving previously created RStudio projects to Git. Yeah, I'll show that right now in these extra skills, other skills. So first off, I wanted to show pulling changes made on GitHub. So if I go onto GitHub, so now I'm on GitHub, I could do an edit here. So here's that file. I just reloaded because I saw that extra line. Because I did that push and I hadn't refreshed the website, it wasn't showing that I deleted that line. So that's why I refreshed right there. So I could edit here. And I'm just going to say add a GitHub. So here I've made the change here. And when I scroll down, you'll see if you scroll down to the bottom, this is, you're going to commit the change. So you're writing in your little book for the repository, add a line. I'm going to commit that. So this is now a change that is on GitHub, but it's not on my local computer. So the two common ways that might happen: one, you made the change on GitHub just like I did. Or if you're collaborating with someone, they made a change, pushed it up, and you haven't pulled that change in. But in any case, there's a change on GitHub that's not on your local computer. So let's go back. I'm going to jump back to GitHub Desktop. So this is watching it. Okay. So right now, GitHub Desktop does not give me any clue that there's a change on GitHub that I don't know about. And the reason for that is that it hasn't had time. It does check, but it's kind of on a schedule, so it doesn't do it instantaneously. But if I waited a half hour, something would pop up and tell me. But I can force it to go check also. So I'm going to fetch origin. So origin is the one up on the cloud. That's GitHub. And what I'm saying fetch is I'm saying, hey, go check if there's any changes. Aha, look at that. So now you see that one arrow. What that's telling me is there's been one commit up on GitHub that I don't know about. And I want to pull that in. So I'm pulling it down. Rather than pushing up, I'm pulling it down. So I'm going to pull it down. But first, let me go into the history here. So, so the last one I have on my local computer is I got rid of that that extra line. And now let's pull it. We'll see it's going to change here. It's refreshing. And there we go. Now the history has changed. I added a line on GitHub. So now I've basically synced up to GitHub. Okay. All right. Yes, I see the comment about getting previously created things on, and I will talk about that in a second. Okay, so that's this one here. So I want to show you something else first. Is for a pretty common thing that people need to do which is, so a really great thing about GitHub is people put their stuff on there and they encourage you to kind of build off it. And so you want to get a copy of their repository. And this is something that can be a little confusing when you start. Okay. So, okay, so let's say that somebody else had a repository and I would like to copy everything in there, and because I want to use it, I want to adapt it, but I'm not a collaborator with them. I'm not trying to contribute back to their project. I just want to make a copy so I can use their stuff and adapt it for what I want to do. I want to do something similar, and I just need to get a copy. Okay, so let's see how to do that. I'm going to copy one of my, go into one of these organizations, and I want to pick something. I'm picking something that I own, but this does not matter. You can do this for anyone's. I'm just using mine because I know I can pick something small. I could go anywhere and get one, but if I get something too big, it's going to take a little while. So I want to pick something small. So the step is you're going to go to the URL that you want to copy. So let's say I want to copy this thing, which is a test repository. It's nice and small. It's going to be fast. And so, so you could go here, for example, and you can copy this. Now I have kind of two options. You're going to see this thing called forking. And if you were to Google about GitHub and it'll talk about like copying things, it would talk about forking. And forking is a situation where you want to contribute to that other repository, or you want to be tracking all the changes in that repository and be able to pull them in later. That's a less common scenario than that you just want to copy their stuff so you can use it. So I'm going to show you how to copy the stuff. So here's what I do. I get a URL, common step. You're always going to be working with the URL. I get the URL of a repository. I go over to the plus, and it's import. This is what you want, import. This is going to make a copy. Not going to be tied to the original. You just got your own copy. You can go in there and do whatever you want to it. So I need to put the URL here. So I clicked import. And so this is where I put the URL that I want. It says your old, but it's anyone's. It's any repository. You put it there, any public repository. And now I want to put it into my account. And I need to give it a name. And now I import that. So that's it. So what that's going to do is create a repository. Remember, a repository is this box, but that box is now not going to be empty. It's going to be full of whatever was copied. And now I can pull that onto my local computer and start hacking away at the files. Okay. Everything else works as before. So question, someone had a question about suggestions for moving previously created RStudio projects to Git. Yes, I do have a suggestion. Okay, and this is going to seem really kind of hacky. If any of you use Git, you're going to cringe right about now. But The reason I'm going to do it this way is that if you do it this way, you're not going to run into any trouble. It's just going to work. If you use the tools to create a repository in a folder, yeah, it may work great, but in my experience, it often gets people into trouble. It's one of those things people contact me all the time. Like, hey, I tried to make a local repository from an existing folder and now I'm running into trouble. Yeah. So if you use this kind of workaround that I'm going to show you right here, you won't run into any trouble. So you're going to use skill 1. You're going to create that blank repository on GitHub. I already showed you how to do that. You're going to clone that onto your computer. That was our skill 2. Okay. And now move the files into the new folder. And then push those changes up to GitHub. So that way of doing it only uses the skills that you've just learned, and everything's going to be connected and it's all going to work great. Now, obviously, if there are reasons you really need like the location and the naming of the folder to stay the same, well, the naming part's easy. Just call your repository the same name. And in terms of location, remember what I said, that you're sort of asking for trouble, in my opinion, if you have GitHub repositories, which are special folders, mixed in to your regular folder structure. So you're not. So if you're mixing non-GitHub repositories and GitHub repositories in your file structure, it's kind of easy to get into trouble. I know people do it, but I've helped a lot of people who've run into trouble when they do that. It's just easy to kind of lose track of which things are GitHub repositories and which aren't. Okay, so if you regularly work in RStudio, is the reason to use GitHub Desktop instead of using Git in RStudio? Yeah, so yes, I do work a lot in RStudio. I do have my RStudio set up to work with Git and to be push and pull from Git. And I pretty much only use GitHub Desktop. And the reason is that GitHub Desktop, even though I have to click out, so like I'm here, I've just opened RStudio. So here's my RStudio. Yes, I do have to click and get over to GitHub Desktop, but oh my God, watch what happens if I do this in RStudio. I'm adding a little thing to test. If I click Git here, okay, great. I see that it's there. Okay, that's nice. Now, when I want to commit, I got to click here. I'm going to click there. Okay, so now I have a pop-up window that I have to deal with. And, I put in my commit message. Okay. And then I'm going to commit. Okay, I've got another pop-up window. Goodness gracious. And now I'm going to push another pop-up window. Goodness. And it takes kind of forever. Okay. I am on my a different computer. I haven't actually put my authentication in, but if I had that set up, this would go through. But you see, it just keeps popping these windows up forever, and now I have to go through and close everything. I find that a hassle, so that's why I don't use it. I know there are other people use it and they like it, so if that is good for you, that's great. Just go ahead and use it. But the other reason I don't use it is that dealing with merge conflicts and doing reverts in the RStudio interface is a bit of a disaster, and often you have to go onto the command line, which there's really no reason to have to do that. If you're doing it in GitHub Desktop, it's really easy to deal with merge conflicts, and it's really easy to sort of revert changes. Also, I have a lot of repositories, so I want to be able to look at all of them, and I can see exactly which ones are out of date with GitHub here. So these are changes on GitHub that I don't have locally, so I could pull those in, you know, something like that. So it's just, I find it a much better platform. Okay. Someone asked the workflow if you want to transfer a repo from one GitHub account to another. No, that's not the same workflow that you'd use there. To do what you're asking, if I go on to GitHub here, where am I? Go back to me here, my repositories. So let's say I'm here, I'm at this repository and I want to transfer it. It's going to be settings over here. Click that and transfer ownership. That's how you're going to do that, to transfer that to another user. Okay, great. Okay, Phil has a great question, which is, how do I copy a file from one repo to another? Aha, yeah, this is a really common question. Okay, it doesn't work that way. Repos are boxes, and you, at least from GitHub, you are not going to be able to reach into a box and grab one file. Does not work that way. You can make a copy of the whole box with everything in it, and once you have it, get it on your local computer, you can then use your file system to go grab a file and do whatever you want. But you're not going to be able to just download a single file. There's a little bit of a workaround there that can be good to know about, and that is if you're working with just like something that's a text file, so not like an Excel file or Jupyter Notebook or whatever, but something that you can click on and then you can just see the content. So I just clicked on test R, and that's just some text here. So, okay, this is a really hacky way to do that, but you can copy it like that. You know, you could copy the contents. It's probably not what you want, but that's how you would do that. Yeah, so you can copy the raw contents. So you can do that, which again, you know, that works if that's like a text file, CVS file, or just a script file. Not useful if this is an Excel file, a Jupyter Notebook, a Photoshop file, a PDF, that kind of thing. Okay, great. So I am going to jump 11:30. Okay, so I'm going to jump over to part 2 and give you a little walkthrough of some GitHub features and some GitHub skills. As I said, GitHub itself adds a lot of functionality around these repositories. And this is where the power really comes in, is if you start using those functionalities in your workflow. So I'm going to want to go over a couple key things, which is I want to go over issues and releases. These are really key. And then hopefully I'll be able to touch on organizations. So let's go here And I want to show you, I guess I'll show you organizations actually first, because okay, so this, I'm in my account, and if you see here, I go over in the top left here. If I click here, I can say my repositories. That is just my personal repositories in my account. And for me, my personal repositories are kind of like a sandbox. I have all kinds of things there. It's not where I would be doing quote unquote production work. So a production work means, yeah, it's my real work that I'm paid for NOAA fisheries. You know, I'm only going to have things there that are really of a certain quality in my organization. So I've got my organizations, which is my production works, and for me personally, my personal repositories is like my sandbox. So that's how I have it organized. Organization sounds really formal, but anybody can create those. I personally use it to organize my different work. So for example, I have an organization, there's a few of us involved that are, it's applied time series analysis. And these are widely used packages and books on time series analysis that 3 of us develop. And I'm going to jump here because I want to show you some real examples of the features I'm about to show. So this is kind of my biggest kind of production quality work. It's a R package, very widely used for time series analysis. So this is just a repository. You can see it's got some subfolders there. Here it's got all, you know, the R functions. This happens to be a package. The key thing here, and any repository is going to have this, it's got this thing called issues. So GitHub has really great functionality to help you organize your work, keep track of your work. And so you can create these issues to keep track of your to-do list. And it's really fantastic because you can like keep track of all the comments related to it. Now, in this case, I am commenting with myself. I am the developer of this. I'm not commenting with colleagues. I'm commenting with myself, but this is a complex project. I have a lot of things to keep track of, and I need to be very methodical and keep track of exactly what task I have. And then, so like, here's a task that I have, and I write the info. This is actually from September. I haven't dealt with it yet. And you imagine, like, if I were trying to just remember what this task was about, you know, it was, you know, 3 months ago, I would totally forget all the details. But this, I came across this bug, and I needed right away to write everything that I discovered about the bug so that when I have time to tackle this later, I've got all the information here. So it's all in my notes. And I've got some checkboxes of what I need to work on to solve this. I have code that shows the problem here. I added a little bit later, I had some more info and I added a little more to that here as I, you know, fix some things. And this, like, using these features, I think is like one of the things that really can boost your productivity, because just you keep all track of all those notes as you figure out, you know, your to-do list and any problems that you need to deal with. And it gives you a really methodical way to fix those. If you're collaborating with people, a nice thing is you can assign it to different people. You can also organize things in terms of milestones. So I organize my work on big projects as a series of quote unquote sprints, which I label as milestones. So I don't want to get distracted working on things that, just as they appear to me. I want to be real methodical of how I approach my work. So I, design these kind of sprints where I'm going to tackle certain things and I'm going to get those done. And then I make a release, get the next sprint done, get those released. So it allows you to organize your work that way. So that's really super handy. When you're collaborating with people, this is a game changer. You see what everybody is working on, what the issues are. If you have something to contribute for solving one of these, you can just put that in the comments. It's all there for you to look at later. Okay. Yeah, so issues are not changes. No, they're not changes. They're just your to-do list. But a good thing is that when you go here, see what figure out what the number is here. The number, okay, this is number 153. Okay, so let's go here. I just hopped to GitHub desktop, and I'm going to hop to the Mars. Okay, so I'm in that repository, and yeah, okay. So what I did is in the description here, I put a $sign, and what that does is that's going to bring up the outstanding issues. And I can, if I do a change that is related to that issue, I can then assign it there and click that. And then I'll do the commit as usual. And then what happens is when I go back here, if I were to go here, I would see in these notes here that I pushed a commit that was related to that issue. So you can track back exactly how you solve a particular problem. I use this when I'm working alone because I need to look back on work I did 6 months ago and figure out how did I solve that problem. But it's also really helpful when you're collaborating with people. You can see, what they've done to help solve particular problems. Okay. So I really encourage you to play around with issues. It's one of the best loved features of the GitHub sort of framework here, functionality that's added. Another really helpful feature is these things called releases. Okay. So I'll hop back to the repository, and I want to scroll over and I'll show you here on the right. So you have releases. So what a release is, let's go ahead and click that. It's basically going to bundle all the files in your repository. It's going to bundle them together and create an archive that you could download later. So, how might you use this? Well, here I'm making a software package. And so I told you I organize my work in a series of sprints. And at the end of that sprint, everything's complete. I create a version. I write some notes about what I was fixing. I also will use releases when I make data packages. So each time the data change, I make a release, and make a note, or this is a team thing, make a note about what the changes are, and so that our data products always have a version to them. So people are getting these off GitHub, but they have them, has a release associated with it, a release version number, so that there's not a question if somebody's using the most updated data, because that data has a version on it. And that's one of a big problem that I find in my projects, is that, you know, it's like, wait, which data were you using? What data was used in that table? You know, it's endless problems, and using releases can help you solve that problem. Okay, and they're really easy. You just click that release button and say draft a release. And you can see it kind of bundles everything up. And it says assets down here. It's basically a zip file. Great. All right. Yeah, okay. I'll post where I am. Yeah, this package is on CRAN. It's a very public package, but this is the one that I'm on. The ATSAES is an organization, myself and a couple colleagues. So that's where I am. Yeah, thanks. And yes, I was showing the releases right there. Yes, thank you. How often would you create a release? Yeah, so let me show you. Yeah, I had this little thing that showed kind of my production workflows. So this is how my workflow would typically be. So like I said, I organize my work into these kind of little sprints that I call milestones, and within those sprints, I have tasks that I have identified. I don't do all my work like this, but this is something that, you know, so an R package I'm working on, or, you know, a major report or something, I organize it in this way. And so I would typically, I divide things up into tasks that I complete and commit, and I'm pushing those changes up to the main GitHub repository. So the GitHub repository, I will often use the main one, not a branch, just the main one, as my development platform. And so I'm not doing that on a branch typically. And each of the tasks I complete, and I don't break things. A task is a task that I can complete, push it up, and everything still works. So that's how I work. I don't like to kind of break my work. I like to do little tasks that I can complete, and they're kind of, you know, self-contained little tasks. So that's how I do it. All these little tasks. And once all those little tasks are together, I then do a GitHub release. And how often would I do a GitHub release? It really depends. For this Mars package, which is a really major package, I do GitHub releases. Really depends. But I would definitely release, like, anytime I have kind of, like, say I'm working on a plotting functionality. Once that task is done, then I would release on GitHub, and then I will bundle a bunch of GitHub releases, which may be plotting and predict functions, different things, and then I would do a CRAN release. So for this thing, I also have GitHub releases and CRAN releases. Now, if I'm working on a data product, okay, so this is data, say we're using this in a report, then every time we would update the data, no matter how small, it gets a new version number. And that's really important. Like even if it's one number that changed in the data, we want to know that we're using the version with that new number. But it's super easy to make these. You just click a button and just type, you know, hey, we added a new number for that population. Boom, done. So, that's a common workflow that I use. And so there are these things that are branches, which are like a copy of your repository, and you can work in a copy and break things there without breaking how things are working in the main repository. So, and that workflow can be shown graphically here. So here's kind of the main thing. And what you can do is you can make a copy and then break everything without hurting the main. Now those changes aren't in the main, but at least you haven't broken things. And so if I'm doing, if I have a task involved that could break things, or if I'm making a major like rework of everything, I will use a branch, do that work on my branch so I don't break the main. And then once everything is working, I merge things back in. But this isn't something that I would have like forever. It's get things done, decide if I like it, merge it back in. So like for me, maybe a month, 3 months, depending how fast I'm working. But if I merge it and then I merge it back in, and then I may go back to making small changes just on the main. That's how I do it. Okay, so let's see, 1147. If you're working on just a solo project that isn't something others need to be part of, would you still use the release? No, I wouldn't unless I had a reason that I wanted to kind of archive things. For example, I would use a repository for, say, a scientific paper that I'm working on. And let's say I was the sole author. Then once I am done with the first draft, I would probably archive that. And then I would have the next draft that I would submit to the journal. I would create a release for that. And then first revision, second revision. So that would be a situation that I use a release personally. And it's just because I find that a nice way to kind of archive a paper and see my sort of record the progress, have an archive. I mean, normally what I do is like in a folder, right? I'd copy the whole folder and to have those versions. So this is kind of the same thing, but I'm doing it with releases. Okay. Super. Okay, so we are coming up on the end. I've got like 5 minutes, and I need to show you one key thing that you're likely to run into. And that is how do you link up, okay, you've got an application that you want to talk to GitHub, and how do you get it to sort of communicate to GitHub? How do you do the authentication? I used GitHub Desktop because first off, it's a great platform. It's really adds a lot of functionality. But also in these situations of a workshop, all you got to do is log in and it works. But you're going to be in situations, if you start using it, you're going to be in situations where you want to be able to communicate with GitHub, and you need to use your username and your password. So let me show you how you do that, because you don't use your password anymore. Okay, our Studio Cloud here. This is our Studio Cloud. And I have not connected our Studio Cloud to GitHub. Those of you who don't use RStudio, you can imagine you were on Jupyter, or if you're a Python user, you know, it's be like Jupyter Notebook. But it's really anything that you need to connect to GitHub to get it to talk to it. So I click on this thing. Basically, I'm going to show you how to get an authentication token, which is simple, but you will probably not guess how to do it. It's really non-intuitive. Okay, so I'm here, and you can see in GitHub Studio Cloud, it's already set up with Git. That's not a really nice feature of it. But if I try to push, it's going to ask me for my username. Okay, great. So I just enter that. It only asks me once, it will record it. But yeah, the first time I try to push something, it's going to ask. Now it asks for the password. So this is going to be anytime you are trying to interact with GitHub and you're trying to do something that needs a password and it asks for your password. You do not enter your GitHub password anymore. If I were to enter it, it would say authentication failed. And I would be very frustrated because no, I know that's my password. Why won't you, accept that? So what is going on here is that GitHub no longer accepts your password. You have to create a token. And let me show you how you do that. So anytime you get asked for your password, if you're not using GitHub Desktop, this is something other than GitHub Desktop, what you're going to do is you're going to go to GitHub. You're going to click here. Let me move this over. You're going to go to Settings. You're going to click Developer Settings, Personal Access Tokens. Okay, watch that again. Settings. So I'm here, click here, I get click Settings. Go over here, Developer Settings, Personal Access Tokens. If you forget how to do this, I forget all the time, Google GitHub Personal Access Token. You'll come to a help page. Okay, I clicked Personal Access Token, and now I generate a new token. Generate it, fine, okay. So the note is not really important here. It's not really specific to an application. Actually, what it is it's specific to amount of time that you're giving this application access to your GitHub. So and then you can give your application a time. You could say no expiration if you want. I'm just going to say 30 days. If you did something that expires, then you're going to have to generate another one of these later. And here's the key thing. You need to tell it the scope, what it gets to do. And for pretty much everyone, you're just going to click that repo. So this is important. You got to click one of those, and the one you need is just repo. Generate the token. And now you need to copy it. It's going to go away. You copy it. Okay. That is your password. So now when I go back here, put this in. Okay. It pushed it. All right, so that's a lot to remember. The key thing there is that you don't have to remember all that. What you need to remember is, oh, wait, I got to use a personal access token and then Google GitHub personal access token. All right, great.
Well, Eli, we're just about out of time. Just want to thank you for going through all that information and to let folks know that the session is being recorded, and we will let folks know when you can go back and view it and walk through the steps again. And we are headed over to the next session that Eli is also hosting, and that's on our Studio Cloud.
Yeah, that one will be quite a bit slower, less content.
Well, thanks, Eli. We appreciate you sharing your knowledge, and we'll see you soon. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, and for Don, yes, there is a NIMPS, our user group that could answer questions.